right, old school NBA fans, self-researched NBA facts. Got another video for you. As always, thanks to anybody who watches my videos, subscribes to my channel. I really appreciate it. In this video here, quite simply, why is the modern NBA getting away with championship runs of not having to play the toughest teams? LeBron's in the title, yes, but this is also more of a modern NBA problem. It just happens to be that LeBron's last championship was really what kicked it off in 2020. A lot of this has to depend on what you think of net rating when you rate teams. Now, I think there's a lot of validity to it. Sometimes you will see a team that the rating isn't quite as high, that doesn't really match their record, or the record is much better than their rating. And I think that just comes down to winning and losing. Some teams were able to pull out close games and others weren't. I think it's just a matter of that versus the net rating. A team that comes to mind is the '89 Cleveland Cavaliers. They were the #1 net rated team in the NBA. But in their own division, clearly there was a better team, the Pistons. They won 63 games. Cleveland had the #1 net rating, but Detroit was definitely the better overall team. The 1990 Chicago Bulls, they were the 9th net-rated team. They won 55 games. They got to Game 7 of the conference finals. Sometimes it can be a little bit out of whack, but overall, it's a pretty good gauge on how good a team is. So since there wasn't as many teams, I'm just going to go to the merger, and I want you to see every champion. It's important. Starting out in '77, Portland Trailblazers. In the first round, they got the Bulls, who were rated 9th. Semis, Denver was 2nd. The Lakers in the conference finals were 5th. Then Philly was 3rd. They played 3 top 5 net rated teams. In '78, Washington played 2, which was San Antonio, who was 4th, Philly, who was 2nd. 1979, Seattle got a bye, and then they had to play the Lakers, who were 4th, Phoenix, who was 3rd, and Washington, who was 1st. They had to beat 3 top 5 net rated teams en route to a championship. The 1980 Lakers, they had to play the 6th net rated team. Seattle was 3rd and Philly was 4th. Well, that's not exactly a cupcake. They beat 2 top 5 net rated teams. The 1981 Boston Celtics, they got a bye in the first round. They played the Bulls in the semi, who were 7th, but really their toughest task was the conference finals against Philly. It went 7 games. Boston won. They were the #1 net-rated team. Houston was only 11th. They were 40-42. Obviously, the Lakers would have been a much tougher test, but Boston only had to beat 1 in that run. The '82 Lakers only won, but it was Philly who was rated 2nd in the finals. The '83 76ers, they had to beat 2. Milwaukee was 5th. The Lakers were 2nd. In '84, Boston had to beat the Knicks, who were 3rd, Milwaukee, who was 2nd, and the Lakers, who were 4th. Boston was a top-rated team, so they were never going to play the top-rated team, but they played the 3 toughest teams besides themselves. In '85, the Lakers played Portland, who was 5th, and Boston, who was 3rd. 2 for them. '86 Celtics, they had to play Atlanta, who was 5th, Milwaukee, who was 2nd, Houston, who was 4th. They had to play 3. The '87 Lakers, they had a pretty easy time of it in the first 3 rounds, but in the finals, Boston was the 3rd net-rated team, and the Lakers won. In '88, it was a little tougher. Utah was 8th, but Dallas was 4th, and Detroit was 3rd, so they had to beat 2 top 5 net-rated teams. In '89, the Pistons, Milwaukee 7th, the Bulls 12th, the Lakers were 3rd. 1990, Detroit. The Bulls were 9th, but clearly they were a better team than the 9th net rated. And then Portland was 4th, so they only had to beat 1. But come on, the Bulls were definitely a top 5 team in the NBA in 1990. In '91, the Bulls played the Lakers, who were 3rd. That was the only one they had to play. In '92, they had to beat 3 of the top 6, which would have been the Knicks in the semis, Cleveland in the conference finals, and Portland in the finals, who was 2nd. In '93, they had to beat Cleveland, who was 3rd, the Knicks, who were 5th, and Phoenix, who was 4th. 3 teams. And so far, that's the most. 1994 Houston. This was a tough run. Portland was 3rd in the first round. Even though they were, a 47-49 win team, something like that, they were the 3rd net-rated team. Phoenix was 5th, Utah was 7th, and the Knicks were 2nd. They had to beat 3 top 5 net-rated teams to win that championship. In 95, they had to beat Utah, who was number 1. Phoenix was 8th. San Antonio 4th. And Orlando 3rd. They had to beat 3 of the top 4. Chicago in 96. They had to beat Orlando, who was 5th, and Seattle, who was 2nd, 2. In 97, they had to beat Atlanta, who was 4th, Miami, who was 5th, and Utah, who was 2nd, 3. In 98, the Bulls had to beat Indiana, who was 5th, and Utah, who was 4th. And I really believe Utah would have been higher, but Stockton missed a quarter of the season, and it definitely affected their record, as it was dramatically better when Stockton was in there. The 99 Spurs had a very easy run. The only top 5 net rated team they played was Portland, who was 3rd in the conference finals. The Lakers were somewhat of a challenge, but they were 8th. The 2000 Lakers, they had to beat Phoenix, who was 4th, Portland, who was 2nd, 2. And then the most on this list, the 01 Lakers, they had to beat 4 of the top 5 net rated teams, which was Portland, who was 5th, Sacramento was 2nd, San Antonio was 1st, and Philly was 4th. 4 of the top 5, the only team on this whole list. In 02, Portland was 8th, San Antonio was 3rd, Sacramento 1st, and New Jersey was 5th. 2003, San Antonio beat Dallas, who was 1st, New Jersey, who was 5th. In 04, Detroit beat Indiana, who was 3rd. In 05, San Antonio beat Phoenix, who was 2nd. 06, Miami had to beat Detroit, who was 2nd, and Dallas, who was 3rd. Every year, you're going to have to beat a top 5 net rated team. There's no gimmies, no cupcakes for any of these teams. Some runs were definitely tougher than others, but you're going to have at least one tough series. 07, San Antonio. Phoenix was 3rd. 08, Boston. Detroit was 2nd. The Lakers were 3rd. 09, Orlando was 4th, but the other 3 teams were 6th, 8th, and 9th. No, they weren't the absolute best top 5. Only Orlando was. But what do you want? Cleveland got beat. 2010 Lakers, they beat Utah in the semis, who was 3rd, and Phoenix, who was 5th. 2011 Dallas, they took down the Lakers, who were 3rd, and Miami, who was 1st. OKC was a 55-win team, but they were the 9th net-rated team. Miami in 2012, that should be OKC. They were 3rd in 2012. That was the only team 2012 Miami beat, not Boston. 2013 Miami, they only had to beat San Antonio, who was 4th, and they did by the skin of their teeth. 2014 San Antonio, they had to beat OKC, who was 3rd, and Miami, who was 4th. Golden State in 2015, barely. Cleveland, who was 5th, and obviously with the injuries, you wouldn't consider them any longer a top 5 net rated team. So you could say realistically the 2015 Golden State did not beat a top 5 net rated team en route to a championship, but technically on paper, yeah, they did. But in reality, no, they didn't. 2016 Cleveland. Toronto was 5th, which is kind of a laugher to me right there. And Golden State was 2nd. Crazy how they weren't the number 1 net rated team, but I believe that was San Antonio. 2017 Golden State. Only San Antonio, who again, really didn't beat a top 5 net rated team. Only on paper. But in reality, no Tony Parker, and more importantly, no Kawhi Leonard. 2018 Golden State. The only team they beat was Houston. They were the number 1 net rated team, but in game 6 or 7, they were no longer the number 1 net rated team. But it's fine, whatever. On paper, they did beat 1. 2019 Toronto, they beat the number 1 and the number 2 net rated teams. They beat Milwaukee straight up. Golden State, they were missing Durant. I know Klay Thompson missed 1 game, but again, on paper, they beat 2. Now here's the team right here, the Lakers in 2020. They beat the 19th net rated team in Portland, the 8th net rated team in Houston, the 11th net rated team in Denver, and the 7th net rated team, Miami. They did not beat a top 5 net rated team. They didn't beat a top 6 net rated team. The only team going back to 1977. Think about that. That's 43 seasons in the NBA was played. Never did a champion go through all the rounds without having to beat a top 5 net rated team until the 2020 Lakers. They definitely got lucky by dodging the Clippers, and then dodging Milwaukee. 2021 Milwaukee, they had to beat Phoenix, who was third. 2022 Golden State, they beat Memphis fourth, even though they had injuries and whatnot, whatever. And then they beat Boston, who was second. 2023 Denver, they didn't have to beat a top 8 net rated team. They beat Minnesota, who was 20th, Phoenix, who was 9th, and maybe they were a little better because they added Durant. The Lakers, who were 16th, and maybe they were better because they added D'Angelo Russell. And then Miami, who was 21st. Really, they were just a hot team. So now you have 2 teams in the 2020s where you had none for the first 43 years after the merger. The next season in 2024, Boston, they beat Miami the 16, Cleveland 13, Indiana 10, and Dallas 14th. Now you can make a case that Dallas was better than their 14th after the acquisitions they made, sure. But that's 3 teams in the 2020s that did not have to beat a top 5 net rated team. How crazy is that? These teams just can't get their act together and maintain that level throughout the whole playoffs, regular season through the playoffs. Injuries, load management, whatever. You don't even really know who the best teams are. I mean, I guess it was OKC because they won 68 games and won the championship, but I don't know. I mean, Boston was what, a 62-win team, defending champs? They were down 3-1 to the Knicks before Jason Tatum got hurt. And then this last year in 2025, OKC, Memphis was 6th, actually, net rated team. They won 48 games, but they just weren't winning like they should that matched their rating. It happens sometimes, like I said. And then Minnesota was 4th, so they did beat 1. But out of the 6 teams in the 2020s, half of them didn't have to beat a top 5 net rated team. To me, yeah, that is a big deal. In fact, the 6 champions in the 2020, they've beaten 4 top 5 net rated teams combined. That's as many as the 01 Lakers. So here are the teams that had to beat 3 top 5 net rated teams en route to a championship. The 77 Portland Trailblazers, they beat Denver number 2, the Lakers number 5, and Philly number 3. A definite nice run. The 79 Seattle Supersonics, Lakers number 4, Phoenix number 3, Washington number 1. Definitely a nice run. 84 Boston, they had to beat, the Knicks were 3rd, Milwaukee was 2nd, and the Lakers were 4th. 3 of the top 4. The 86 Celtics, they had to beat, Atlanta was 5th, Milwaukee was 2nd, and Houston was 4th. The 93 Bulls, they had to beat, Cleveland was 3rd, the Knicks were 5th, and Phoenix was 4th. 94 Rockets, Portland was 3rd, Phoenix was 5th, and the Knicks were 2nd. 95 Rockets, Utah number 1, San Antonio number 4, and Orlando number 3. The 97 Bulls, Atlanta was 4th, Miami 5th, Utah 2nd. The 01 Lakers actually beat 4. Like I said, the only team since the merger to beat 4 top 5 net rated teams. Portland in the first round, they were 5th. Sacramento in the semifinals was 2nd. In the conference finals, it was San Antonio who was 1st. And in the finals, they beat Philly, who was 4th. That's the only team. And then the last team to beat 3 top 5 net rated teams en route to a championship, the 02 Lakers. They beat San Antonio in the semis, they were 3rd. Sacramento in the conference finals, they were 1st. And New Jersey in the finals, they were 5th. So when you look at it, these are all either great runs or great teams, or both. 77 Portland definitely was a great run. They were down 0-2 in the finals, came back to win that thing. They swept Kareem and the Lakers in the conference finals. I know Lucius Allen was hurt. 79 Seattle, very nice run. 1984 Boston, culminating by beating the Lakers. 86 Boston, that was a great team. I don't think the strength of their opponents was super tough. Now, when you're a Nick Wright, Shannon Sharp type pundit, you're going to focus on the individual players when you're trying to make your case. I've even heard people like Scap Attack do this. If you're Scap Attack, you're going to say, oh man, when Jokic won his championship, they beat Anthony Edwards and KD and LeBron, the alleged GOAT with AD. Come on, man. These teams were not very good, let's face it. They were not championship level. But in the case of 86 Boston, you could easily say, oh, well, they beat Michael Jordan, and they beat Dominique Wilkins, and they beat Sidney Moncrief and Terry Cummings, and they beat Akeem Olajuwon with Ralph Sampson. It's like, yeah, I know, but come on. The best team they beat was probably Milwaukee, even though Houston did give them problems. But still, Boston was just an unbelievable. They were unbeatable at home, literally unbeatable. The 93 Bulls, definitely a nice run. They weren't the number one seed. They had to beat Cleveland, a very good team. The Knicks, who had them down 0-2. And then Phoenix, the best team in the NBA in 93, at least in the regular season. They beat those three. 94 Houston, very good run, an excellent run, underrated run. When people always talk about the 95 Rockets run, yeah, I get it. But when you go by net ratings, the 94 Rockets beat 4 of the top 7 rated teams in the NBA. The 95 Rockets beat 4 of the top 8. Now, I realize that includes the number 1, but in 94, they beat the number 2 and the number 3. Both were really nice runs. I would say the 95 was slightly better, but both were clearly great runs. 97 Bulls, they had to beat Atlanta, who was 4th, one of the best defensive teams in the league. They had Mookie Blaylock, and they had Dikembe Mutombo. They had Steve Smith. Christian Laettner was an all-star that year. That was like his best season. They had a solid team, very good team. They won like 56 games. And Miami, they were the 5th net rated team, but they were the number 2 defensive rated team that year. And they actually beat the Bulls, I think, both times in Miami in the regular season. And then, of course, Utah, they were the number 2 net rated team, beat them in the finals, and they were beating everybody, crushing them, a 64-win team. This is a team that down the stretch, they were like 46-8 to end the season. They were red hot right before playing the Bulls. And then, yeah, the 0-1 Lakers beating Portland, who was 5th, Sacramento 2nd, San Antonio 1st, and Philly 4th. And then the 0-2 Lakers, the last team to have to beat 3 top 5 net rated teams, San Antonio 3rd, Sacramento 1st, and New Jersey 5th. So that's it. Only 10 teams have had to beat 3 top 5 net rated teams en route to a championship. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence, but maybe you do. Larry Bird has 2 of them. Michael Jordan has 2 of them. Hakeem Olajuwon has 2 of them. And Shaq and Kobe have 2 of them. That's just how it is. And then, of course, Portland and Seattle, those great runs. But once again, the modern era, beating up on bad, injured, whatever you want to call it, teams, because the best teams just can't make it. If Oklahoma City would have played Cleveland or Boston in the finals, I think their championship would be stronger. Even though Indiana took them 7, they didn't really have a real tough matchup out west. Come to find out, Houston is the number 2 seed. They weren't really that great. The Lakers as the number 3 seed, we knew that was a joke. They didn't hold up. But LeBron James in 2020, the first team to win a championship without having to beat a top 5 net rated team. Just another thing you can add to the catalog. So anyway, that's all I got for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If you wouldn't mind sharing it, that would be great. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. I give daily content, and that's it. Until next time.